Let's try this one more time and see if we get any sound out the other side. The indications below are that I've got live sound. And that tells me that we've got something going correctly. Okay, and since you guys are early, I'm just going to show you around my office and what I've got. This is in my house, and as you'll notice, if we look toward the back here, this area is a decorative area my wife loved to decorate. I've got some bits and pieces from trips I've taken, some family bits and pieces. And then as I come around to the side here, you'll see bookcases. I have these all around. And most of my library, you'll discover, is theology. Then if we look around here, you'll see that this is a typical office where you have a neat desk as a sign of a sick mind. And I go around the other way. There's more theology. And you can see I have 4 screens. I have lots of fun with 4 screens. I'm an active trader, and so that becomes very helpful. Tuho, you're most welcome for the videos during 2016. That was a very, very busy time. It was not by my design. It was one of those things that happened accidentally. And what can I say? I kind of got pushed into doing the work on Parkinson's to start with, and then it took on a life of its own. And then this just followed afterwards. Hopefully I got the camera where I'm going to leave it now. Incidentally, this desk I'm sitting at is not a movable desk. It's part of the cabinetry. It comes out of the wall. It's hard done out of the wall, and it comes out and it bends on a 45 so that when I sit, I'm like this. Over here where the camera is toward the doorway. And it's just very cool. And from just left of where the camera is sitting, all the way around to here, it's a free floating desk, which just has 2 pillar feet underneath. So I have free room for my legs. We've hidden all of the cords for everything up under a backsplash and whatnot. And I love it. It's cool. Oh, Rick Shank, you're welcome on the Parkinson's series. Christian Love, glad I'm still alive to speak about it. The Clinton people got dead around the Clintons when they had something the Clintons wanted hidden. I just flat out said what I thought, and so there was nothing left to hide. And so, there wasn't anything we could do. It was kind of interesting back during there. On the original Parkinson's video, we had 5 million roughly views, and I had about 2 million views over a 24-hour period. Yet on YouTube, it never showed up as trending, and the hot trending ones had 100,000, 200,000 views. So we know about all that. Clintons could move that desk out. Well, yeah, chainsaw will do all sorts of things. All right, now, since it's not 6 o'clock, the people who are waiting for 6 o'clock, I'm gonna give them a chance to get in. Are there any specific subjects you want us to talk about? Okay, I see one on current censorship. Let me write that down. And I'm going to hold that because by the way, I got to turn a couple of lights on. The lights I turned on are more about washing out shadows than anything else. There are some big legal issues on the censorship of social media and the Communications Decency Act. So I'll have to talk about that. Walk away. Yeah, that's a great movement. I don't know if we'll get to everything. And I don't have a set length of time for things. We'll go until I get tired or you get tired or I feel like I've run a little too far. Low carb, high fat diet. Yeah, 43 pounds down for me, more to go. Trader Glenn, fake news in the midterms. Who's gaining more supporters? Can loneliness affect your health? Okay, we can talk about that real easy. Loneliness can easily affect your health. There are a lot of things you can do which you won't do well if you're lonely. We are community animals. Everything you do, ultimately you do in community one way or another. Even if your community is online, you're still in a community and you have friends. And you guys, for example, are a big part of my community where the fact that you're out there and that you're willing to take the time to watch and to listen to things I have to say is a huge boost for me. When I'm teaching at church, I tell the class the same basic thing. I mean, you guys make it all worthwhile. And it's not that I have anything dramatic to say. It's just that you think I do. And that's a huge boost. It makes people feel good and they act better. It's not that depression will kill you. It's that the acting badly around depression. It's acting badly around loneliness in one fashion or another. I need my comfort food, so I'm going to eat a carton of ice cream. Those sorts of things. Those are the things that hurt you. It's not the being lonely by itself. Who's gaining more support, conservatives or progressives? I would say the progressives are probably losing support by their extreme out on the far left wing actions. I mean, when Pocahontas says that it's more important to talk about children being separated from their parents on the border than it is the fact that Molly Tibbetts was murdered by an illegal alien. By the way, don't ever call them undocumented or illegal immigrants. They are illegal aliens. Mueller, we'll probably hit on Mueller along the way. Oh, and related to the difference of support between the conservatives and the progressives, African Americans coming along in the walkaway movement, that's a huge thing because people are seeing what's in their wallet get bigger. And as Corporal Q-Ball said during Clinton's campaign, it's the economy, stupid. And remember that people vote their perceived self-interest. And if I've got a bigger paycheck because of whatever these guys did, I don't care what they did. My bigger paycheck says keep it coming. Show me the money. My thoughts on Q, I basically don't. Medical tricks to keep the president to stay well. If he could eat his cheeseburgers without the bun, that would help. Social justice warriors, they're warriors, but they are not interested in justice. And that's an issue of definitions. This is cool. You guys are seeing me on my first time, and I'm going to take a moment's break, go get myself a cup of water, and we'll come back and make this thing happen for real. So stand by. Oh, one other thing, since it's not 6 o'clock quite yet, my computer clock says I got 2 minutes. You may notice I'm a golf addict, a golf nut. I got a whole bunch of golf clubs in here. I'm doing an article on the bounce, which is this part of the bottom of the golf club, and its effect on how you swing the club and chipping, and the fact that our discussions of the bounce aren't quite what they're cracked up to be. So you can see I get involved in a bunch of different things. And, I'll show you one other thing. I told you I do a lot of theology. Here's one of the books I've published, Primer on the Book of Revelation. Another one to get you guys interested. I'm sure that'll get your interest up. And then, it's back in the stack here, but there's a companion volume to the book on Revelation. It's a primer on the book of Daniel. All right. As soon as that computer clock rolls around, we'll make it official. All right. It is now 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'm Dr. Ted Noel, and welcome to VidZette, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. Tonight is our very first live stream podcast. So you get the video straight up live. You can ask questions, and we've been doing a little prep work on that. And I'm going to start with some of the news of the day. I'm going to do things a little different format than we've been doing. The mainstream media is all over two issues, Manafort and Cohen. Manafort, as you know, yesterday was convicted on 10 counts of money laundering, bank fraud, and the like. And when we look at that, all of these were offenses that happened long before he was involved with Trump. So they have absolutely nothing to do with Trump. If he committed those criminal acts, hey, that's his problem. He committed a criminal act and should expect to suffer for it. Michael Cohen, the not wonderful attorney for President Trump, actually ex-attorney for President Trump. He, as we know, paid money to two women to obtain, actually, he paid money to one named Stormy Daniels, stage name, for a non-disclosure agreement, and then routed money to the National Enquirer, who bought the story of another woman and then stuck it in the back drawer so as to not publish it and keep it quiet. Now, both of those are perfectly legal actions. The question is, did Michael Cohen commit a campaign finance violation? And there's an issue in the law, and if you want to hear longer discussions, listen to Alan Dershowitz or Mark Levin. Both of these men have given very, very detailed discussions of it, but in essence, it goes like this. The payment to Stormy Daniels was it says I got feedback. Sorry about that. Are you still having it? Still having feedback? No. Okay. In any case, Stormy Daniels had a payment that was perfectly legal, and it's done all the time for non-disclosures. It happened to benefit the campaign, but it also benefited Donald Trump in a personal sense, in a family sense, whatnot. That makes it what's called a dual use payment. And this has already been adjudicated several times at the Federal Election Commission. A dual use payment is not a campaign contribution. Therefore, Michael Cohen pled guilty to a crime he did not commit, because what he did was not a crime. And there is no way that it could be. If he had done it on his own strictly because he was going to do something nice for Trump, and then it acted like a campaign contribution, then he would be guilty of it, but Trump wouldn't be guilty in any case. So there is absolutely no effect on Trump in any case. So we just don't have to worry about it. You have all of the shouting that's out there about Trump being an unindicted co-conspirator. That's hyperventilation by the left. They know it's not true, but they don't care. They're going to lie all they can, and that's the way it is. We just have to live with it. Chuck Schumer's on Twitter daring Trump to pardon them. Yeah. Well, if that's what's going on, fine. Schumer can go out there and yell all he wants. Trump's going to do what he wants, and he plays three-dimensional chess while they're playing checkers. So I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, let's look at the next one. Weiner's laptop is in the news again. We now know that remember the story was right before the election, Anthony Weiner's laptop was discovered to have a huge number of emails on it. On a whole bunch of them were Hillary Clinton emails that had come through his wife, Huma Abedin. Well, they got cranking on it. Turns out that the FBI in the Southern District of New York pushed the central office to look at this. And they pushed and pushed and pushed. And finally, the central office couldn't ignore it anymore. So they said, yes, we'll look at it. It's part of the cover-up. They didn't want to know about it. So they looked at it, and then they made a show of, we're going to look at all of the emails there. It turns out they didn't even look at 1% of the emails. And there are a lot more emails that we now know contain classified information there. So they've got a big problem. And this whole Clinton cover-up is coming apart. Yeah, crying Chuck Schumer out there, yeah. So that's a news item. Now, let's look at a couple of things that stay in the news. Opioids. As you will recall, I am an anesthesiologist. I do not play one on TV. I am an anesthesiologist. I spent 36 years in anesthesia, 32 years in private practice. I administered more fentanyl than most people will ever dream about. I administered that stuff by literally the gallon. And when we were doing open heart surgery, for example, we gave massive overdoses of fentanyl intentionally because it acted as a very, very smooth anesthetic. Patients were very, very stable. They didn't react to incisions. It made it very nice if we needed to do things to support blood pressure or to lower blood pressure. We knew that we could handle those things directly without having to worry about other things. Fentanyl's a great drug. Now, if I look at fentanyl, there are several of what we call fentanyl congeners. You have fentanyl, sufentanil, remifentanil, alfentanil. All of 4 of those have been in clinical practice. They're essentially the same drug with very, very minor twists. And then you have carfentanil, and there are a bunch of these others. They're all varying potency and duration. They are, to all intents and purposes, the same drug as morphine, heroin, or Dilaudid. The difference is how you give it, how much you give, and how long it lasts. They all have the same effects. And the idea that heroin is a drug that needs to be banned is complete and utter stupidity. Heroin has no basis for being banned. It comes out of the time of the Transcontinental Railway, where you had all the Chinese laborers, and on their day off, they would go in and smoke opium or shoot heroin, whatever. Well, they didn't shoot because the needles weren't really available, but they would take heroin and they'd sleep it off, and the next day they would come back to work. Well, the Chinese were a hated minority, just as the Jews are a hated minority for the anti-Semites, or the blacks are a hated minority for the white nationalists, and on and on. They were a hated minority. There was never any reason for it, but William Randolph Hearst, among others, got out and publicized the idea that the opium was creating opium fiends who would run around and rape white women. Didn't happen, but he whipped up hysteria, and opium and heroin got banned. Chemically, they're basically the same. Let me back up. Heroin is diacetyl morphine. That is, essentially, you take morphine and you treat it with acetic acid or vinegar, and you get heroin. It's that easy to make. And so they're the same drug. If we had heroin, it would be just as good a drug as morphine or Dilaudid. And some people might get nauseated with morphine and Dilaudid, not on heroin. So it would be an alternative for people who need pain relief. One other key thing here is, as we look at the opiate problem, we had 74,000 opiate overdose deaths last year. Those are not a medical issue. Hear me out. They are not a medical issue. Yes, you can treat them with naloxone, give people the Narcan pens, whatever. That's fine. But fentanyl in the heroin is an economic issue, because what you have is, yes, it is the Harrison Act, 1915 or 14, somewhere in the Harrison Narcotics Act. That's one. But at any rate, all of the things that went on, let me start over, getting ahead of myself. I see a comment come up and I come back. Maybe when I get as big as Mike Cernovich, I'll be a little smoother at all that. At any rate, what you have is people on the street peddling the forbidden fruit. And because it's the forbidden fruit that people want, you can charge a higher price for it. Well, if I'm going to charge a higher price, you're going to want the better stuff. And this guy over here says, I got even better stuff. What did he do? He added fentanyl to his heroin, but you don't know how much. And pretty soon people are dying because they don't know how strong the drug is. Plus, you have all of the extra crime from the drug dealers and the shootings and all the burglaries and other thefts that addicts do to pay for their habits. If you got rid of the laws restricting the drugs, you decriminalized it, follow Portugal's model. Portugal pays $4 a day. That's less than a latte to maintain a narcotic addict. $4 a day. So what we have to do is follow Sutton's law and see who is benefiting from all of this. You have police. We get all of these fancy toys to chase down drug dealers. You have rehab centers. Well, there would be very few rehab centers if we didn't have all of this other stuff going on. We have politicians who can say, look, we're answering to the epidemic. Follow the money. Every one of those people is going, show me the money. And the money says, keep it illegal because I benefit. If you made it legal, all of a sudden, we'd have no trouble at our southern border from the narcotics guys running the border with their loads of heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, and whatever. There'd be no money to make, no reason to run the border. You get rid of all of that crime. You get rid of the overdoses. But the rehab centers, a lot of them go broke. A lot of the police departments lose their fancy toys and extra grants. And the politicians have to go hunt for something else to look like they're taking care of their constituents instead of looking out for the fact that freedom works every time it's tried. Yeah, addiction will get you. Needles are no fun. Okay, let's see what I got in the stack of stuff. I wrote up a piece that I published in American Thinker a couple of days ago. We were talking about John Brennan, and he was out screaming when Trump pulled his security clearance that he was losing his freedom of speech. That is pure Barbra Streisand. His freedom of speech was not impacted in any fashion. Think about what a security clearance does. Security clearance gives you the right to see things that you can't tell other people, because you need to know those things in order to do your job. That's what the security clearance is about. It has nothing to do with what you can say, except that it restricts what you can say. Now, with a security clearance, you can go to a party where people with all of the other similar security clearances are talking, and you can hear them talking about things. And if you're not in a need to know, you might discover some things. All of a sudden, if you lose your security clearance, you can't go to those parties because you can't hear what they're saying. You're not allowed to. Because if you do hear it, they're up on securities charges because they violated their clearance. The other thing that happens is you lose the opportunity to sit on some corporate board or other places where your security clearance is worth millions of dollars. So why is Brennan screaming? One, he hates Trump, but two, his wallet suddenly got hurt. Remember Sutton's law, follow the money, or in Latin, quo bene, who benefits. Yes, Brennan almost certainly was the source of the fake dossier. That whole collusion with the FBI and the Clinton campaign is so deep and so involved, I couldn't possibly repeat all of the links in it. There's no way around it. Yes, follow the money. That is Sutton's law. And incidentally, anybody who doesn't know the reference, it's actually a misquote. But Willie Sutton was a famous bank robber, and somebody was supposed to have asked him, "Why did you rob banks?" And he said, "'Cause that's where the money is." Apparently, he never actually said it, but it's a good line. Okay, we had a question in the pre-session about social media. Now, there's a very big legal issue here in social media. Legally, Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're all private companies. Now, granted, they are public companies in the sense that you hold stock, and I happen to have, for example, stock options right now, positions on Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Well, I don't have it. Yeah, I've got them all. They're part of what I trade. So technically, in a way, I control some stock of theirs. But the fact is that they are governed by a very tight board, and they are a private company. That is, they're not owned by the government. There is a section of the Communications Decency Act which specifically insulates these companies from editorial actions. And essentially what it says is, if the purpose was, if you shut down incitement to riot, if you shut down slander, we're not going to get in your way of shutting that stuff down. That's going to be okay. You have an affirmative defense. But what they've done is allowed themselves the liberty of censoring various private speech on their supposedly neutral public platforms in ways that we don't see. For example, VidZette was shadow banned on Twitter, and you had to know that you unlock the content filter before you're able to search for VidZette. Otherwise, you come up empty. I don't even exist. Then a number of accounts. Prager University lost 99.999% of their traffic for 3 days. I mean, they have millions of followers, and all of a sudden they got one view in 3 days for all of their stuff. Twitter apologized, but they've got a huge army of people who are out there shutting down conservative thoughts. And it doesn't matter if you're very carefully reasoned. And PragerU is very, very carefully structured stuff. They never call names. They do things very, very deliberately to educate, much like John Stossel does. And John Stossel got shadow banned. But PragerU just got shut down completely. And every time one of these things happens, there's this uproar. They get called in front of Congress. But the problem is, you don't have any way that legally you can go unless Congress changes the law. And you know darn well the Democrats are going to dig in their heels in the Senate and try to prevent any changes from happening. Now, speech is free in the United States. If I look at my copy of the Constitution, it basically says that the freedom of the press shall not be abridged by a law that Congress passes. In other words, they get to speak. You and I get to speak as well. But what happens with them is they set up like we can speak and then they shut down. Well, that's their free speech. The question that arises is, do we have a way to get there? I don't know that there is a good way. I have a question out to one of my legal friends. Could we conceivably look at what they did? For example, Twitter, Facebook, Google, all completely delisted InfoWars within an hour of each other. That sort of thing would be what we call monopolistic conspiracy. And the question arises as to whether the Sherman Antitrust Act would allow us to do anything about it. I just don't know. All right, what do we got here? John Jihad Brennan. Yes, he voted for the Communist Party candidate. We know. Oh, with $7,500 rebates ending this year, where do you think Tesla will trade later in this year? Will it go private? I don't think it'll go private at present. Tesla, as you will recall, has never made a dollar manufacturing a car. Their entire profit has come from that $7,500 tax rebate. Every penny. If they had no extra tax preference, Tesla would not be able to manufacture cars. The problem you've got as to what do you think that their stock will do, there's an underlying premise in that the market cares about the fundamentals. Now, a company that can't operate and is going bankrupt, yes, their stock will go to zip. But in general, the market doesn't give a crap about fundamentals. And the market, I'll give you one example, and Tesla is one of the examples. I had what's called an earnings trade set up on Tesla. As long as it stayed within a certain range, I would make money on my trade. Well, what happened? Tesla came out with an earnings report that not only beat their own internal projections that they had released, it beat the market analysts' projections. Now, what do you think should happen? If all of that happened, this is wonderful good news. Their stock should go up? No. Tesla had what's known as a black swan moment. It went through the floor and kept going. I got hurt very seriously on that trade. They had wonderful news and their stock went down. Key here is the market operates as an indicator of mood. And apparently the mood of the people who were buying and selling Tesla was black. And whatever went on, they took that as an excuse to go down. I'm not going to try to teach you guys Elliott wave theory. That's an analysis of mood subject for another time and another place. But basically, markets operate on mood. They don't operate on value. Unless you're willing to hold something for extreme lengths of time, like the Oracle of Omaha with Berkshire Hathaway, you really can't do much there. When can I give you a take on when the notorious RBG will retire from the Supreme Court? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I wish I knew. Everything I have seen about her indicates that the two cancers she's had are far enough in remission as to be an unlikely event, for recurrence. She has a training session several times a week at the gym in the Supreme Court. And by all reports, there are a lot of law clerks she puts to shame. So you just can't say. Now, the other thing that could happen would be that her mind starts to go enough that the other justices say, you've got to step down. If that happens, that happens. It has happened before, but at present, she's only done a couple of things in public pronouncements that say she's just lost it. And at this point, I can't make a prediction. But she is, 88 years old or some such? All right. Sugar is more dangerous than drugs. Yes. If you go back and look at the two videos I published when I was touring Poland, you will see exactly what I'm talking about there. I had one was the most expensive subsidy and the most dangerous subsidy. If you go back through the YouTube channel, you will find those. And basically, remember to separate out sugar, which is table sugar, which is one glucose molecule and one fructose molecule. It's a twofer. The fructose is the killer in it. Separate that from what's loosely known as a blood sugar, which is actually a blood glucose. And if you eat a bunch of the four bad ones are rice, potatoes, corn, and wheat. All of those are very starchy, and the starch breaks down quickly, gives your blood glucose a quick bump, and then your insulin goes up. Remember that type 2 diabetes is an insulin toxicity. And I'll leave that for here. What else do we have here? Low IQ Maxine, she's her own joke. All right, I don't see any. What do I think of Governor Moonbeam killing us Californians? Well, the guy he's drunk the Kool-Aid. And ultimately, what's going to happen is that the California economy will crash badly enough that they'll come crying to DC for a bailout. And hopefully Donald Trump says, you did it, you live with it. And then we will see what happens when you can't have somebody else pay off your debt. As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. Suspect deaths, Andrew Breitbart, Antonin Scalia, JFK. Well, okay. I can't comment on Breitbart. I don't know anything about that one. Antonin Scalia, there's been various suspicions, but there's been little or no evidence that allows anyone to go anywhere. Seth Rich is the one that you would pick up for high rate of suspicion for having been ordered by the Democrat National Committee or the Clinton campaign. JFK Jr., okay, I'm a pilot. I do a bunch of things. JFK Jr. flew his Piper Saratoga into a moonless night over water. He was a VFR pilot, and in your visual flight training, you only get 4 hours of gauge time. Now, I happen to be instrument rated, so I know how to fly on the instruments without reference to looking outside. That's not a big deal, but he wasn't trained. And once you get over water on a moonless night, you don't know whether the stars are above you or below you, because if they're reflecting off the water, it looks like the bottom is up, and you have no visual references. And he had what's called spatial disorientation and went into a death spiral. It's classic, has happened thousands of times, and he was just the next one in line. No conspiracy, nothing else. He was just a stupid pilot. Yes, California is going to become a sanctuary state, or they're going to try to. Their pensions are underfunded by billions. Yep. Will they get to the point of Venezuela? I think our courts will shut things down before it gets that far. Remember, Venezuela has hyperinflation, which has basically taken their economy apart. And because DC controls that, the Federal Reserve, we may see a little inflation, but remember, California isn't the whole country. It's big, but it's not the whole country. Any new observation about Hillary Clinton? Looks like she's hiding a device as some sort of back brace. Yes, go back and see the video I did on Hillary's 9 lives. We walked through, she had a back brace. She's in the middle of summer. It's hot. She's wearing a heavy coat, and it's very obvious she had this big back brace showing up through the back of her coat here. It was poking up. You couldn't miss it. And she hadn't had any surgery. She'd had no injuries. And a back brace like that is commonly used for a problem in Parkinson's disease called camptocormia. Now, camptocormia is a neurologic problem that results, and I'll just back up and you can look at this. What happens is that you lose muscle control over the upper half of your body and you end up with that hunched over position. If you lay down flat, your body straightens out. You just lose the muscle control. And back braces are commonly used to help relieve camptocormia. And there's a whole bunch of Parkinson websites with a whole bunch of suggestions on them. It's no mystery at all. Tax cuts will hurt Californians. Overall, no. The tax cuts overall will help Californians. The only people who will hurt is Silicon Valley, where you have a lot of those tech millionaires. And the key is that they won't be able to write off as much of their state sales tax and income tax. And frankly, it was a smart move because New York, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Illinois, very high tax states, they're all Democrat states, and they're all hurting. And what it does is it forces the state to listen to people saying, you need to cut our taxes. We're getting killed. Hillary 3.0 will announce. Yeah, well, we'll put that on the list of predictions. Oh, the McCain foot brace. Yeah, I did a piece on that a while back. I don't remember exactly when it was. And his problem is that he does have a glioblastoma multiforme. It's the same tumor that killed Ted Kennedy. It's real. He has not been seen in Washington, D.C. in a number of months, I think on the order of 9 or 10 months. And he's done a few tweets, but he really hasn't been seen in public. I'm a little surprised he's lasted this long. I don't think there's any question that he's got it. It's just the question is, what is the date on his death certificate? And then following that, who will the governor of Arizona not put in his place? I'm certainly hoping it's not his wife, his widow. We need a real Republican. And of course, once McCain is gone, if Cindy McCain claims, well, you promised me, then guess what? It ain't happening. You can't hold me to it. And if you claimed it was a promise, guess what you sound like? Best state to move to in terms of conservative politics, low taxes, and fewer libtards, Idaho or Utah. Florida is a swing state, and that's where I am. And I'm in the I-4 corridor, which is the swingiest of the swing state segments. And so it's very interesting to watch races down here. Yes, Hillary fell down the stairs in India. I did a piece on that a while back too. That was a case. I talked about the various tests for Parkinson's there. She failed a retropulsive pull test basically on those stairs. Have I heard of Q? I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it except reading tweets about QAnon, and I've gone out to look at it, and it's a discussion board, and I really haven't looked anywhere beyond that. Does CBD oil, I don't know which oil that is, control cancer or just pain? I have no information on it. Remember, cancer is not one disease. Cancer is a whole raft of diseases. So there are a handful that are genetic. Many of them have dietary components, and they are a whole raft of different diseases. So, the so-called cure for cancer is not going to happen. It's this one or that one, and we do other things. We do know, for example, that if you are on chemotherapy for breast cancer, a ketogenic diet helps you get through it better, and your outlook is better. We know that obesity, which comes from type 2 diet, is associated with type 2 diabetes, makes the risk of breast cancer worse. The survival is worse, and so on. Oh, marijuana oil. We're talking about cannabis oil. Yeah, the cannabis oil has a very, very low amount of delta-9 THC in it, which is the intoxicant. And it's been touted for a number of different things. And recently I read a study that oral ingestion of cannabis oil is useful in parts of autism spectrum disorder. So, that remains to be worked out. If you want to follow what's going on in the medical world, there are several places you can look. PubMed is run by the Library of Congress, and it keeps all of the peer-reviewed articles in the medical literature that are in English. That's a good place to look. WebMD has a fair amount of reasonably good stuff on it. It says only 42 watching. Hey, this is our inaugural one. I'm not going to try to do anything dramatic. We've put a half hour in here. My videos were normally about 10 minutes. Okay, I'll answer one more question. Glyphosate and other carcinogens. The premise on that is incorrect. Glyphosate has been shown not to be a carcinogen in a whole raft of studies. And this is one problem where you have courts trying to rule based on science. They're simply not qualified to rule. And there are many, many studies on glyphosate that show it's not a carcinogen. So I'm going to leave that one there. Are vaccines safe? In general, yes. Anything you ingest can give you problems. Remember that air is deadly. Everyone who has breathed it has died. Generally speaking, vaccines are safe. You can get Guillain-Barré disease from them, or disorder from them. It's really quite rare, but you can get that from other things as well. And it's just some of those incidental things that pop up from time to time. Boric acid safe in the house? You got me there. For killing roaches, hey, anything that kills roaches makes your house safer. How's that for a firm answer? Big problem with roaches. They are a beetle of sorts. They have a hard carapace, and it's hard to get sprays to penetrate them. You can kill a wasp with carburetor cleaner. That's the now been used in some of these knockdown sprays, because a wasp has a soft outer exoskeleton and it penetrates right away and dissolves their nervous system. Roaches, hard to penetrate. Just logged on. Am I now doing podcasts? Well, I'm going to try doing things this way once a week. I'm going to try mostly for Tuesday nights. I was going to do it Tuesday night, and we had an urgent problem in the house that kept me away from doing it at 6 o'clock when I had scheduled it. But we're going to try to do this Tuesday at 6 p.m., and I'm going to try to stay close to the news. And as long as I can say something useful, I'll keep going. I have no interest in being loud. I have no interest in doing a Hannity where he talks about where they bleach blitted and acid washed and smashed with a hammer, and he runs that mantra 48 times an hour. I'm not going to do that. Are transsexuals mentally ill? You got a problem there with what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's written by psychiatrists who declare illnesses for whatever they want. Transsexuals, I would say, are mentally disordered, but mental illness is another problem to define. God designed us to be men and women. You read Genesis 1, it's very simple. Male and female created he them. And that's the image of God. And it's a compound unity. He did not say Patrick and Fitzpatrick. He said Adam and Eve. Are they demon possessed? You can make the argument. I'm not going to be dogmatic about that. One of the things I want to be careful about when we talk about the Christian faith is to remember what's central, and that's the cross. The maestro is here. Good to see you up. Perhaps sometime we'll do one on biblical stuff. It can be interesting, but at the moment, I think I'm going to let it go. Australia finds links of aspirin causing bleeding. We've known about that for decades. it causes bleeding because it acetylates platelets, and platelets don't work properly. But you're not going to get bleeding in the brain unless something else is going on as well. Yes, that's why they need Jesus. And I think this is a good time to let it go. I rambled on for over half an hour. Perhaps next week we'll have some new news. In the meantime, thanks for watching. And I'm just thrilled that all of you guys are here, and I'll try to make it as interesting as I can for next week. You have a nice evening, all.